If you've got peanut butter and noodles at home, you gotta try these garlicky peanut noodles. Now this is one of my favorite weeknight dishes to make because it is delicious, obviously, but it also comes together quickly and easily with mostly pantry ingredients, and it's very easy to customize. And we're gonna get started with our protein. As I mentioned, this recipe is very customizable, so I'm gonna use tofu as my protein source, but you don't have to use tofu. You can use whatever protein you like or just omit it. It's up to you. This is 1 block of extra firm tofu, and as part of my meal prep this week, I've already drained it, pressed it for 10 minutes, and cut it into cubes. And I'm coating the tofu in 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil and a little bit of salt and white pepper to taste. I like using white pepper just to complement some of the flavors in the peanut sauce, which we'll get to in a bit. But if you only have black pepper, that's fine too. 2 tablespoons of potato starch. Now this is going to help the tofu crisp up in the oven. Spread out the tofu on a parchment paper lined sheet pan. The reason I like making this baked tofu for this recipe is because it's super hands-off. Once it goes in the oven, we can kind of just make the rest of the recipe. All we need to do is flip the tofu halfway, but that's pretty much it. And the parchment paper here makes for very easy cleanup. Spread them out because the starch will make them stick together. This is gonna go in the oven for 30 minutes at 425 Fahrenheit. I've got some water heating up on the stove, and while it comes to a boil, we can get started with our aromatics and vegetables. I've got 4 scallions here today, and we're gonna use the entire length of the scallion from the very top to the bottom. If you do have any bruised or damaged tops, go ahead and trim those first. I like to slice them thinly on a bias. On a bias is really just for presentation purposes. If you don't wanna go through that motion, you can just slice it straight up and down. Either way is fine. Since we're not cooking the scallions, I don't want them to overpower the dish with their pungency, so I'm gonna soak them in some cold water just while we make everything else, and that way we'll get a nice oniony flavor without it being overwhelming. Now we're gonna grate 4 cloves of garlic. I've got this handy little grater that will make it very quick to do that, but if you don't have one, just use a sharp knife and mince as finely as you can. Anytime I make a noodle dish, I try to find a way to incorporate a vegetable just because they're good for you. And today I have a red bell pepper. I like the sweetness and the color that it provides, but you can customize this. You can julienne some cucumbers or chop up some snap peas or grate cabbage. If you have leftover steamed broccoli or green beans, any green vegetable hanging out in your fridge, feel free to fold that in as well. Last bit of chopping to do, we've got some roasted salted peanuts. I want this to be a peanut forward dish with a lot of peanut personality, I guess. And so we're gonna use a generous amount, a 1/2 cup, and just give it a rough chop. And this, of course, will also add some nice crunch to the dish. We're ready to make our peanut sauce now, but before we do that, I just need to give the tofu a quick flip. Now there are a million ways to make a peanut sauce. This one is pretty simple, but to zhuzh it up a little bit, I'm going to sizzle the garlic in some hot oil just to amp up the flavor. So you wanna get your smallest saucepan. This is a tadka pan we use in Indian cooking to temper spices. If you don't have one, that's totally fine. Just use the smallest receptacle vessel that you have because we only need a little bit of oil. So get a generous tablespoon, maybe 1.5 tablespoons of neutral flavored oil in your tiny saucepan. I'm gonna heat the oil on my stove over medium heat for about 3 minutes until it's really nice and hot, and then I'll pour it directly on top of the garlic. So satisfying to hear that sizzle. Just make sure the garlic is covered in the oil, and we'll let that rest for 1 minute. This is one of my favorite techniques from Chinese cooking because not only do you get this really quick way to cook aromatics like garlic, but the garlic also infuses its delicious flavor into the oil, so it is a mutually beneficial relationship. Now we'll stir in 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, a generous tablespoon of rice vinegar, 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, and finally 2 teaspoons of brown sugar. Sugar might seem like a weird addition to a noodle dish, but it's really going to enhance the savory saltiness. It's gonna make each bite even more delicious. These are peanut noodles. Obviously, we need to have some peanut butter. And for this recipe, you want a creamy, non-chunky variety. No sugar added either. You want a heaping 1/3 cup of peanut butter, but it is much easier to measure if you have a scale, so that's about 95 grams. Important tip when you are making a noodle dish with a nut butter or a seed butter like tahini as the sauce, it can get really thick and tacky from the nuts or seeds, so it's important to thin it out with some water. I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of hot water, but if you were using dried noodles, which we'll get to in a minute, you're gonna wanna use a little bit more, about 1/3 of a cup of water. And now add your sizzled garlic soy sauce mixture. The sauce might feel a little thin at this point, especially if you use that greater amount of hot water, but once it hits the noodles, it's gonna start coating it really nicely. I love using fresh or shelf-stable udon noodles because they are thick and slurpable and bouncy, so good. But this recipe also works well with dried noodles. I've used dried udon noodles. You could do some thicker rice noodles. Could probably even do like an Italian linguine, as long as you don't tell anyone about it. It's gonna be delicious regardless. And in general, this is a very flexible recipe, so you can use whatever protein or vegetable you have on hand. Even if you're allergic to, say, peanut butter, you could use almond butter or cashew butter. So whatever you do, I promise it's still gonna be tasty. By the way, the reason we did all of our mise en place earlier is that these kinds of udon noodles cook in just 2 minutes, so don't really have any time to multitask. I prefer these peanut noodles at room temperature rather than hot, so I'm gonna rinse the noodles under cold water for a few seconds. Time to assemble everything. I've got my scallions here that I've drained. You can see they've curled up nicely from the cold water soak. Get in your veggies of choice and the peanuts. And our final ingredient, my very favorite, is Chinese chili crisp. Now you can use whatever store brand you like, but I have some homemade chili crisp from my cookbook. It's pretty much always in the fridge, so I'm gonna use that. Once you try it, you'll probably also wanna have it in your fridge at all times. And a few more scallions for garnish. Ooh, I'm so excited to eat. Looks so good. This is a savory dream. It is so flavorful and perfectly saucy. You can get the full printable recipe linked in the description box below. If you're in the mood for more noodles, check out this recipe and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.